Let's say, should we get started since it's 6:30?
Please and thank you.
Okay, can we call the meeting to order? And can you do roll, please?
I will. Jordan Whitron,
Not here.
he indicated he was ill and he may not be here. Carol Allen,
Here.
Twyla Harrington,
Here.
Randy Lauer,
Here.
Rich Allen,
Here.
Danny Stephenson,
Here.
Victoria Rizzo,
Here.
and me. We have a quorum.
You have a quorum, nice. The next is public comment. Do we have any public comment that's not on the agenda? Thank you for being here. Okay, did you guys have a chance to look over the minutes from August 9th and September 27th?
Yes.
And do we have a motion?
So moved.
For a second?
Second.
It's like old times, Rich.
Right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, passes. Thank you. Boy, that's quick. We're on number 4. Okay, discussion of police service considerations.
Great, thank you, Chairperson. As you recall from the last meeting, that we focused on fire services based on the request of the working group. We have assembled a stellar panel of experts on East County law enforcement to give you some insights, answer any questions you have. I have spoken to all 3 of these individuals and explained to them that your job is to consider what things do we need to know as we approach renegotiating or looking for a different source of law enforcement coverage for the city of Troutdale in June, July of 2025. So each of these individuals are prepared to talk about what they see as things we should consider, what things to look out for, just what information you may need to find out to help you make that decision in the future. And on the agenda, the first person we have on the agenda is Dave Nelson. Dave Nelson is a former chief of police for the Troutdale Police Department. He followed that by being the city manager for the city of Troutdale for a couple of years. Then after that, he worked many years for CIS, which is the insurance brokerage that most cities and counties use. And now he works for another insurance agency based out of Salem. The second person on our list tonight, you see, is Robin Sells. Robin is the former chief of police for the city of Gresham. And I'm sorry I don't have your history before that. If anybody wants to know, they will ask you. But she is now retired. And the third person on the list is Monty Reiser, who is actually physically in the room. Monty retired as the chief deputy from Multnomah County Sheriff's Office, and he was our designated chief for a couple of years back in 2016, 17, as I recall. And he is retired, but he's back on special mission working for the Sheriff's Office right now to finish up some certification duties they have. So with that general introduction, we will start with Dave Nelson. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Ray, and thank you all for having me. I'm not sure how you want to proceed. If you want my bias, I'll tell you that now as the former chief of Troutdale for 8.5 years, and I've always tended to believe in local control and having that local police department, and I was proud of the department that we had built when I left, and so I don't know if you want me to, how deep you want me to go, Ray, or if you prefer questions, or I did read the material that you provided, the intergovernmental agreement and the other attachments that you've provided. So I had a good basis of what the agreements between the sheriff's office and the city are. I have a couple of comments specifically to those, if you want me to address those now, or I can answer questions, or however you'd like to proceed.
Well, I would suggest, Chairperson, that he goes ahead and gives his ideas, what he's thinking. I think just so our 3 guests understand, the committee is pretty well versed on Troutdale's history, pretty well versed on one of the reasons that we moved to Multnomah County Sheriff's contract was the price point was much better. But everything is on the table right now for this group. They're just kind of thinking, green light thinking as to what they should be considering as we look to future law enforcement in the city of Troutdale. So
Okay.
they just go ahead, for, 10,
Well,
15, whatever
yeah.
you're comfortable with.
So looking through the documents that you provided, Ray, and having a little bit of background on it, what struck me as, and I don't know where the staffing is now from the sheriff's office. I don't know the number of employees that left when the transition occurred, that went from the city to the county. At the time this contract was entered, there were 27 full-time employees that left the city of Troutdale that moved to the sheriff's office. And that includes the chief, command staff, the patrol, and record staff. If I read the contract and the agreements and the attachments correctly, all 27 of those were accepted into the sheriff's office, and there was an agreed upon seniority ranking system, agreed upon vacations and the like, and some duties that they would be assuming when they took over. In the additional documents through the agreement, what it showed was that there were only about 20 FTEs that the sheriff's office were filling with the agreement. So there was a discrepancy of about 7 full-time positions. So moving forward, and I don't know where the staffing is now. Maybe that was, the sheriff's office knew that they were essentially subsidizing the city 7 full-time positions at that time, because that's what they were doing. And so my recommendation would be, as you're moving forward, to make sure that you're looking at apples to apples. And because when you're looking at the contract, and now I understand why there was a savings for the city, because they moved 27 full-time FTE to the sheriff's office, and they were paying for roughly 20 or slightly over 20.
Yeah, if I could point out here, Dave, what Dave's referring to is in the Appendix B of our contract. When it listed out when we figured out what our charges would be initially per year, it ended up at like 16.53 FTE is what was used to total up the personnel side of what we were getting from the sheriff's office. So I just want.
Yeah, so just as you move forward, and again, that may have flushed out over the years, because it's been a number of years since this contract was entered, and maybe it's even Steven now. But I just think that as you move forward, one of the things you want to make sure that you're looking at is apples to apples comparison, FTE to FTE. I wasn't there when this contract was initiated, but the other options for the city probably would have been to lay off 7 people, or roughly 7 people at that time, to right size the budget. So there was certainly a financial need at the time. Just as I was digging through this, it was really clear to me that there was a discrepancy in the FTE. And then what I also noticed was that almost all of the employees that left and went to the sheriff's office were employees that were there when I started or I hired. And so I recognized a lot of the names, and I've stayed in contact with a number of them since then. And the other part of the puzzle that I struggle with is all of them received pay increases. And so, all of the staff that moved over there received salary increases. And so how does that save money when you're increasing the salaries of the employees? So again, making sure that as you move through the process, it is apple to apple comparison. The costs that are being, and I was trying to remember what the BOC budget, that's the Bureau of Emergency Communications budget, was when I was chief, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it was, but it was several $100,000 that the city was paying BOEC for the dispatch services. And in the contract, the city is still paying those costs, for their officers. There's overhead costs. There's about a $500,000 at the time this contract was entered. About a little over $500,000 worth of additional fees or services that the city was paying on top of the contractual agreement for the deputies. As you move forward, it's certainly your choice how you want to have law enforcement services for the city. I have nothing against Multnomah County Sheriff's Office. They are a wonderful organization. I worked with them when I was there. I have no gripe about what they do or the services they provide and the professionalism of the organization. When it just comes down to dollars and cents is what I was really focusing on, and what jumped out at me with the numbers that I mentioned previously. So I think the things that you will need to look at, if I was still chief and of your city, what I would be looking at would certainly be the cost figures, the services that you are receiving now, and what you received back when you had your own police department. One piece of information was more of a question, but there was some calls for service data that was in the agreement that was about, it was like just over 4-minute response that the Troutdale police officers were providing from the time of the 911 call until they arrived on scene for priority 1 and priority 2 calls, and then about a little over 10 minutes for priority 3 to 7 calls. So one things that you would want to look at is, are those being maintained? Are the response times that you currently have for priority 1 and 2 calls, are those increasing beyond that 4-minute mark, or are they faster, or remaining the same? So when you're looking at the service, that's one key factor that you want to look at, is that call for service. One other from a staffing perspective, it looks like it's still staffed at the level that when I was chief from 2000 to 2008. That's still the same staffing level. So that might be something you want to look at as well, is what's the call volume compared from when you entered the contract roughly 9 years ago. What are the total calls for service versus where you are now? And there may be a point that you may need to look at additional deputies or officers per shift. Instead of moving from like having a minimum of 2, you may want to be looking at a minimum of 3 in some cases, or 4 in some cases. So that's something else to look at, is the call load that you have. So those were kind of my low-hanging fruit, if you will, Ray, that I looked at. That, again, it was the budgetary impacts, the staffing changes, making sure the comparisons are equal, the call for service, the response time, and the overall calls for service that you currently have. Other pieces of that puzzle include population growth. Troutdale still, I assume, is still pretty landlocked, and the only way you can really grow is kind of southeast, kind of out towards that farmland. So you're going to have infill, but the majority of the population is probably going to be remaining the same, but that doesn't mean the calls for service are going to decrease. So I think the call for service is a real critical piece that you need to look at. So with that, Ray, I'll pause and turn it over to Ray or Monty or whoever goes next, and be happy to answer any questions when we get through the other speakers.
That, or it's up to you, Chair. If you want to ask them questions now or wait, it's up to.
Do you guys have questions now, or do you want to wait to hear from the other two?
Wait.
Wait. Yeah, we'll wait until we hear from Robin.
Okay.
And
Sounds great.
thank you. Should we go ahead and go to Robin?
Go for it.
Great, thank you. Hey, Ray, you forgot to mention that I was a former Troutdale resident, which is an important part of my bio there. Come on.
Sorry, because I looked out my office window and I saw the deck of your condo. I know. You were.
He used to run by my condo. I don't know if he was just out there running or if it was stalking. I'm not really quite sure what it was, but
Take the fifth on that question.
Well, thank you all for inviting me to this really important question. And, a couple of questions I would have back to the committee is, what are your thoughts on keeping Multnomah County sheriffs? Is there things that you are not getting service-wise that could maybe be mended and fixed, or is it strictly monetary? And that's something I wouldn't have any knowledge about. But in talking to Ray today, I know the thought had come up, could Gresham possibly take on Troutdale? And I am a Gresham person through and through. That is, I think that the men and women of that department, I come from California, and I would put that department up against any of those agencies in California today. And the problem is Gresham has trouble staffing. And I know Ray got a number of, that they're down right now of 3. And I followed up after I talked to him today, and the number is actually 10. And if they had the 10, that would only bring them to 119. So when I was there, the highest year that we had, I had 136 officers. So they're down 10 to get to 119 when they really should be, if they're at the level they were at when I was there, it's 136. And I have to tell you, that 136 is not enough. They recently had Barry Dunn and Associates do a study, and they recommended a lot more officers than they currently have. So staffing is always an issue, and you look at who they're competing with. Portland gets paid more per officer, and so does Multnomah County Sheriffs. So, it's kind of a toss-up. I think that they could do a great job, and Troutdale would be easily absorbed into one of their districts without any issues whatsoever. It's just, can they staff it, and can they staff it on a regular basis? We have east part of Gresham doesn't get as many calls and high priorities, and officers are often pulled from those districts to go to Rockwood. And I fear if they were to take on the contract, that might happen for Troutdale too, that the officers that are assigned to Troutdale would get pulled over there on a regular basis. And I don't know if that's a service that you would want to actually get. Like I said, law enforcement wise, they are above the best. I really can't say enough about that, but I'm just worried about the staffing. Gresham always has financial issues. I don't think anybody here is surprised to hear me say that. Everybody knows the property tax money doesn't come in like it does for some of the other cities in Oregon. And therefore, I would hate for this to become a moneymaker for them to try and, fill that gap financial wise. But the other thing Ray and I had spoke about is maybe a 3 city, Troutdale, Wood Village, and Fairview, which I think that's a great idea. I know you talked about being biased. I think most communities want their own police department. They want to see that same officer every time. And when they go to the coffee shop, they want to know that guy or gal. And when you have contract cities, you're not going to get that same feel. Troutdale is a very homey, all-American kind of city. And I think that they deserve their own police department. It just comes down to the cost. If you were to do it with Fairview and Wood Village, can you match up to the service that you're getting from the sheriffs as far as training and equipment and that type of service? I don't know. I don't know what the financial situation is there, but that's kind of my thought. If you start your own department, don't think that those deputies are going to come over, because they've got a lot of benefits over there, and they've got a lot of a good, decent salary. Like they were saying, like Dave said before, they got a big raise when they went over there, and they're not going to leave that unless you match that. Can you compete with that? And I think that's the issues that I would see right off the top. But I'm open to any questions you might have for me. Crickets.
Thank you.
Monty, why don't you come on up and have a seat since you're in the room?
Jump right in.
Jump right in.
Jump right in.
So a few weeks ago, I get a text from Ray. And it said,
So there
give me
I
a
was.
call. And it happened to be on my birthday. And I thought, wow, after 4.5 years, Ray remembered my birthday. I call them and invite me to the meeting. I really appreciate it.
When's your birthday again? I'll remember it for next
You
year.
Wish me a happy birthday. So I guess my perspective is, I lived through the transition of the contract. I was not a part of the contract negotiating team. But I do remember a lot of the highlights of what happened during that time. It seems that part of the discussion with City Council and the negotiation team was in fact that Troutdale had a staffing issue, and there was a fiscal issue that was sort of the impetus of those discussions that took place at that time. When you look at consolidation, and many of us in the executive arena and law enforcement in Multnomah County, we looked at that over the years. I remember back in around 2005, the city of Portland and Multnomah County entered into this charter agreement where we looked at what inefficiencies existed in the waterways in Multnomah County with the various agencies that respond to the incidents there. We also looked at the West Side Patrol, and there was a bid, I believe, that Portland Police gave to the county that was, I think we had like 5 or 5.4 in a post factor, which showed how many deputies should patrol that district, and I think the city came in with like 20 officers that they wanted to effectively, they said that they could effectively patrol that district, which is a large district. But with the discussion with Troutdale, it was what can the city of Troutdale get in terms of service delivery for the sheriff's office that they're not already getting at a better cost. And I think when you're always looking, policing and service delivery, you should always go with what's the best cost for an improved service delivery. And I think that's why ultimately that contract was passed. When you look at the time, the staffing of Troutdale, but I think more importantly, when everyone saw the benefits of the sheriff's office with the advanced training, and some of I think Robin and Dave both mentioned, the advanced training, you have the HR support. I think a big one that was talked about was the county is self-insured. So what happens, in liability and civil lawsuits that may come about against employees that the sheriff's office manages. So I think reduction of that liability for the city of Troutdale was part of that discussion. Just the command, the levels of command, being able to manage the different areas of the sheriff's office or police department. I mentioned the training. We also have the logistics involved. I don't think, and I have not looked at that contract since I was here a while ago, but if you look at the costs involved in managing property and evidence, and the staff involved in that, and with the sheriff's office, what was added to the capacity for the city of Troutdale is you have a professional standards unit that consists of an inspector or a manager that oversees internal affairs. So the disciplining and the oversight of accountability for members, that was sort of removed from a smaller agency and brought into a different policy and a different resource capability. Within that professional standards, you also have inspections personnel, and they go in and they ensure that there's accountability in terms of property and evidence, and looking at those higher liability guns, drugs, and money, those evidentiary items that deputies bring in on a daily basis when they're investigating crimes. So part of the benefit that came with the contract as well, I think all of East County benefited in the tremendous use of this new facility and maximizing the space. and it has worked out. I think it's probably at its maximum capacity in terms of operations. But with this facility, you then have the record staff that operates out of here 24/7. I remember one of the discussion points from a Troutdale lieutenant was that you had, at any given time, there was not a sergeant that was working, or they were on call, so you did kind of lack of supervision was involved in that inadequate staffing. I remember hearing about police officers having to come to the Troutdale Police Department to find a warrant card that another officer in the county arrested somebody, and they had to confirm that for them, and they didn't have a record staff. So there's other, I think, to do a proper audit of services, that should really take place in terms of, where was Troutdale at, what is the benefit now, and Robin was saying, making sure that you understand what is working in the contract, what's not working. Are there inefficiencies that can be identified through, is there overlap that does exist?
If I could add one thing here,
Yeah.
Monty, just to explain the sergeant issue. Beforehand, we did not afford to be able to have a sergeant on 24/7 to supervise every single shift all the time. What happens with the sheriff's office is because they have multiple districts surrounding Troutdale, they can devote a sergeant to supervise, let's just say, the 2 Troutdale deputies, and supervise other deputies in other districts nearby, so that we get 24/7 sergeant coverage, but at a lesser cost than just a Troutdale employee being the sergeant. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify, some people don't understand that sergeant issue. And I know Tanny's gonna have a comment later on the sergeant issue.
I probably will.
Okay. But these are just things, as Monty, we've asked them all. Monty's just laying out the things to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I mentioned, the HR capacity in terms of, marketing, running an assessment center for promotions. That's expensive, and that takes a lot of resources. Hiring deputies and going through that process and the background investigations. Those are all things in terms of, if you ever create a new police department, there's a huge checklist of resources that would have to be identified in terms of how are you going to address those issues. Data analysis, right? Planning analysis. How would an agency that doesn't have the capacity to look at crime data and traffic crash data to help, educate counselors and commissioners on justifying adding capacity or reducing capacity for those issues. So, in terms of, the different models that can be considered out there, they're touched upon already. I think, an existing, are you satisfied with what you have in current 10-year contract? What doesn't work, and have those things that, have been identified as weaknesses, as what have the attempts been to try to remedy those? What does it look like from bids from other agencies? And, in terms of costs, but service delivery is what I think you want to enhance. You want it to be a better model of law enforcement and more cohesive. And, I think it's easy to say, one agency, a smaller agency, what Troutdale Police Department was, a wonderful agency. And we benefited from wonderful officers that came over to the sheriff's office. I'll talk a little bit about that transition. It involved, establishing a mentorship program with our deputies and the incoming officers, making sure that they understood policy, understood just relationship. We went through a CBI core value index training that I think Troutdale actually had some success with. We brought that to our law enforcement operations, and we trained officers and sergeants, the new deputies. And that was great in terms of the personality traits and better ways to communicate. And Yeah, we had the training, and then we had developed our mission, our principles, and we talked about those a lot in that transition. So, no, I think, I definitely applaud this group. I think the effort of, trying to provide your community the best possible, cost-effective police model is what could be more important. So, glad to answer your questions.
Any questions?
More of just a comment. I think what we're trying to do here is just gather information for particulars around this that we don't know. And for me personally, I think having some perspective that, and I knew this going into it, I'm sure all of us knew that going into it, but having perspective that this isn't just talking about officers in a car on the street patrolling the city. This is layers of staff that each police department, each sheriff's department has on hand to help and assist the officers in doing what they do so they can do an adequate job for the community. So having that insight, I mean, even just, what Monty just laid out is just, it's helpful. It's helpful to keep that at the forefront. It's helpful, what all of you have said, to keep at the forefront. But for me, I think that's just, that right now is most important. Realizing that it's not just the officers in the cars.
Kenny? Do you have anything?
Questions? I don't have any questions at this time.
Rich?
Probably more comments as we evaluate all this. This all-star panel here, so I'm very appreciative. And I think law enforcement has gotten harder than what we used to be, right? Due to law changes and so forth, and political climate, it's just gotten a lot harder. And so it's hard to compare what we have now compared to what we used to have, because quite frankly, what we used to have was very good. Remember my daughter throwing rocks at the neighbor's roof, right? And an officer shows up for that. Hardly a high priority call, but there we go, right? It was a high level of service. We had the reserve program out at the park, which was pretty successful. And then my interactions, if I may expound, my interactions with the sheriff's department is when there's something going down and it's important or serious, or they're right there, boom, they show up, right? I'm not so sure we're doing as good on the smaller ones, the smaller incidences, taking care of the smaller matters. But that's something maybe we can work out. People have ideas. And then my interactions with Gresham Police Force have been very positive. I like their professionalism as well. I think they do a very good job. So I think we're lucky in the sense that we do have excellent law enforcement within the region, between the Gresham and Sonoma County Sheriff. I don't remember, I was on budget and council at the time, and I don't remember the financial problems. I think you're chair of the budget committee. I think we were asking, what do you need? Do you have everything you've got, you want? That sort of stuff. But that may be something from a staffing level, because managing your own police department is a heavier burden amongst the city staff. So they might have been looking forward to not having to deal with such a large group. And those are just some of my thoughts there. So my question would be is, how do we improve our reaction to the smaller incidences, the less than 1 or 2 priority calls?
My question would be, I think for all three of them, even like Monty touched on it, what is the impact of retention if the city can't match the benefits, the advancement opportunities, the training, the ability to move to different departments. I mean, all the options that are available for a larger department. Even if Wood Village, Fairview, and Troutdale combined together, you're still not going to have a big department. I'm just wondering, how does that impact your ability to hire and retain officers in a smaller agency? If Robin or Dave want to comment on that.
Robin, you can go first and I'll follow up.
Okay, it's huge. It's huge. The department that I came from in California was a slightly smaller than Gresham, 86,000 people and less than 100 officers. And we often would have officers leave to go to bigger agencies like Anaheim or Santa Ana, where they had, like you said, there's chances to do more specialty assignments where we didn't have that ability. And I think that would be problematic for Troutdale if you were to do that, because I don't know how many specialties you could possibly have. I kind of remember, and Dave, maybe you could help me. I think Troutdale had maybe 2 detectives in their detective bureau. Was it more than that?
We had 1 all the time, and occasionally we would have 2, but I can address that in more detail in a second.
Yeah, and being in patrol, that's the best job. But there's a high burnout, and people need a break. They need to go to detectives or school resource or something else, canine, something that they have ability to have a little bit of a break. To do a 30-year career in patrol is not very common, and you get cranky officers when that happens. And I don't think that's what you want. However, if that's the path you want to go down, is to bring Troutdale PD back, I think you have to start yesterday, because to get policies and everything in place would be a huge undertaking. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Robin. So staffing, and I think it was Rich who said this, that staffing across the board nationally, not just in Oregon, not just in Troutdale, Multnomah County, but nationally, law enforcement staffing is very, very difficult. There is not a long line of people wanting to sign up to be to be a police officer or deputy or state trooper or corrections right now. It's not the profession it used to be, unfortunately. There's been a lot of negative media over the last roughly 8 to 10 years that's tarnished the profession. Incidents across the country that occur, whether it occurs in Minnesota or Philadelphia or anywhere else, that comes back to the local level. They will think that if you have a uniform, regardless of the color, in Oregon, that you are cut from the same cloth as those in Minnesota. And so it's difficult across the country to hire and to retain. 5 years, 7 years in the profession is very common anymore, and where instead of doing a 30-year career, people are coming in, doing 5 and 7 and getting out and doing something different. And just so that some of the people on the committee know me or knew of, may recall working with me over the years, but just for those that you don't know, I left Troutdale as the chief in 2008, so it was a long time ago. And I turned over the police department when I went to the city management position to Scott Anderson, who was the chief that did the transition to the sheriff's office. So from 2000 to 2008, when I served as chief, there were things that we did that addressed some of the issues that have come up that I want to just kind of highlight. It is difficult it was easier then than it is now, but it was difficult to recruit and bring people into Troutdale because of the salary issue. But a lot of the people that came to us were there because they wanted to work in a small town, and they wanted that small town community. They didn't want to work in Portland, or they may not want to work in Gresham, or because they didn't want the call load that they had. They have a lot higher call load than you would have in Troutdale. But one of the things I was very aware of and that I tried to address when I was serving as chief was the issues that, that Robin brought up about not having a lot to do. You're in a small community and you're going to bounce around the, roughly 6 square miles for 30 years. That's going to get real boring really quick. And so some of the opportunities that we created were the SRO program. So I worked with the schools to help them fund those positions. So we at one time we had 3 SROs, and one of them was a SRO and a DARE officer. We had 2 TriMet officers. So TriMet was actually paying the bill for that, over 100% of the salary for the Troutdale officers. But it was an opportunity that we could give our officers to go do something else for 2 years and then come back, take that training, that experience, and come back into Troutdale and go back to patrol or advance to a sergeant's position or whatever. We had 1 full-time detective, and then we rotated the detective in and out for about every year, 18 months. We would put someone from patrol into a detective position for a period of time, just to get that experience and to do something different. So those were some things that we were doing at that time, in that 2000 to 2008, that were trying to address the staffing and retention. We didn't have a lot of people leave when I was there. We had a couple leave. Some I separated, going back to Monty's comment, professional standards. Fortunately, we didn't have a lot of internal issues, but there were some that were separated from the organization that I got to sit across the table from and discipline or discharge. But we didn't have a lot of people leaving necessarily on their own, maybe a handful, 2 or 3 in the time that I was there to go to other agencies. One of the things that, we were proud of at the time, is that we were I think the 13th agency in the state when I was the chief to be accredited through the Oregon Accreditation Alliance. Scott, when he became chief, he got the agency reaccredited. That is now becoming a state mandate for agencies across the state. And so it was a voluntary compliance that I did and Scott followed up on. That is now mandated. And I should know this, when it occurs and it's done by FTE, number of FTE you have in the organizations, but I'm sure that Gresham and the Sheriff's Office are already falling into that category where they're going to be required to be accredited through Oregon Accreditation Alliance now or very, very soon. So there were some things that we did do to address some of the retention issues, and by providing alternative duty assignments for anywhere from 12 to maybe up to 36 months on the long end. We did have, again, I can't remember how Scott transitioned things and readjusted the staffing that he had. But when I was there, we did have a full-time evidence officer. But it was only, as Monty pointed out, it was only from 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. We did not have, not that we would have an officer come in periodically, but very rarely would they come in after hours or on the weekends to do evidence or property release. It was usually done with Monday through Friday. So having that 24/7 is certainly a service that the Sheriff's Office is providing that was not being provided by your former staff, is because we had one. So there were some other comments, but they escaped me now. So I'll be quiet and let other people speak and ask some other questions.
I think it was Robin's turn next, wasn't it, to
Yes.
pontificate on that question of retention and recruitment?
Oh, I actually started it by talking about, I think it's Monty that maybe needs to jump in. I'll talk again.
No, my bad. Just making sure that
I want to earn that coffee that you promised me.
Yes, come on down. Oh, come on up.
You didn't promise me coffee.
I listened to your sales pitch at the LOC conference last week. How's that?
Oh, okay, fair enough.
So I'll talk to the point on retention. I know the Sheriff's Office, one of the One of the things when I first started, you know, you heard about Multnomah County Sheriff's and the attrition rate of people leaving was like, I think it was 3% at the time. So I think it's an agency that historically over the years, people are very satisfied with in terms of, you know, the progression of their careers, the call load. I think sometimes historically around the state, people think Multnomah County Sheriff's Office and has to do with more urban-specific policing issues, when for the past 40+ years, we've been concentrating on those rural patrol jurisdictions. Back in the early 90s, was really the last of our two City of Portland geographic areas that, well, 30 and 40 districts, which was highly urban. But we essentially lost those through that process of consolidation. In doing so, I think we lost 20 of our deputies to the City of Portland. But the great thing about the Sheriff's Office in terms of careers, and you'll hear this, I think, from the Troutdale officers that came over in 2015, is the variety of assignments. David mentioned SROs, but you know, we do have a fairly robust detective unit and special investigation, dangerous drug unit. At the time, you know, we had other detective assets in elder abuse and child exploitation through a program called Intercept. So those were all, you know, terrific programs. The amazing thing that I found was, and it speaks to the quality of the police officers that came over from Troutdale, is I can't tell you how many of them have been promoted into higher ranking positions. It's really a testament to the quality of officers that that we were fortunate to bring over. But we're also fortunate to have, you know, some existing relationships, just being an adjoining policing agency and covering the officers and deputies covering each other on some calls throughout the years. So, you know, variety in the opportunities for advancement. And the final note is just, I had just heard that if not fully staffed, we're only 1 or 2 FTEs away from being fully staffed. This is maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago when I had a discussion with the chief deputy. So I think that is, and I totally recognize, you know, the challenges of law enforcement, and there's definitely, you know, this sort of challenge of attracting new police officers, new deputies. But whatever the sheriff's office is doing, I think it's a good thing in terms of attracting either new lateral certified officers or new deputies.
Rich.
May I ask a question? Multnomah County Sheriff, how well are we at diversified years of service? Because I do remember that Troutdale had a number of officers that were up there in years of service, which may have been a concern for the financial director. How are we doing now? Do we got a good mixture?
I don't know currently.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, when I left in 2019, I would say we're a relatively younger force because of the amount of retirements that were happening. And I think that sort of continued on through 2020, 2021. You know, definitely there was some impact locally on law enforcement officers retiring when they were able to. It was a difficult time in terms of you know, the challenges that they had. But currently, you know, I know that there's a number of lateral hires that have come over, which has helped, you know, significantly in terms of cost. Sending new members to the academy is very expensive. And so, but yeah, I can't speak directly.
Yeah, it's actually a testament to the quality of the organization that you're just 1 or 2 FTEs behind.
Yeah.
When you did have a kind of like a bubble of retirees that came through the system, right?
Yeah, I was excited to hear that. I thought it was great that, we were able to get that staffing back to where it should be.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
For these three.
One other quick comment.
Yes.
You mentioned law enforcement accreditation. That's why I'm back at the sheriff's office. The sheriff asked me, I'm the law enforcement accreditation manager through House Bill 2162. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be glad to come back and talk to you about it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Well, I guess I'm gonna ask one question of all three of them. I'd like to be fair for these three wonderful people, but maybe I'm being presumptuous. Just my perception of this is it sounds like one of the questions that the council will ultimately have to answer is, it seems like, how do we get the benefits of the size of Multnomah County Sheriff's Office or Gresham Police Department with some improved level of local control? It seems like that's kind of the crux of the whole question that we're facing. And at a price that we can afford.
Yeah.
I would say that's very well stated.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know, on that issue, is there anything that any of the three of you want to add, knowing that's probably what the decision is going to come down to and the discussion is?
Well, I'll take a stab at it first, I guess. I think it would come down to the relationship that you, Ray, that you have with the appointed chief that's serving as the Troutdale chief, currently Doug Asbo. And making sure that you can address those priorities that are with the council and the community. And making sure that he, currently Doug, Chief Asbo, is able to address those to your satisfaction. And let me go back to, I kind of had a quick summary of things just to focus on for for this committee and the council would be the service level that, that you're receiving both from the sworn staff and also, as Monty was highlighting, the non-sworn staff. So making sure you're not just looking at the patrol function or, which is clearly very important, and the supervisory is very important, but also having the what's the impact on the non-sworn record staff 24/7, where Troutdale wasn't. It was Monday through Friday. So the service level that you're receiving, the overall staffing that you're receiving from the sheriff's office. I worked for a sheriff's office on the coast for 10 years. It was the best job I ever had. I loved working for a sheriff's office. Sheriff's deputies like to roam. I did. And so one of the things that you would need to control, or to at least have reports back on, would be how often are the deputies really in Troutdale, or are they roaming? Do they tend to creep out to Gresham, to Rockwood, or to Corbett, or Fairview, or elsewhere? Are they up on 84 working traffic? And so that is something that you want to watch, that creep. The one benefit we had when we were the Troutdale Police Department was that roughly 4-minute response time, and that's pretty hard to beat. Local control, and as we talked about before, being able to get to the issues or the concerns, whether it's from a community member or the council or someone from this committee, to Ray saying, we're not happy with a 30-minute response, or we're not happy with seeing or not seeing deputies in the neighborhood doing patrol. That was one of the feedbacks I would always hear when I was chief. Was it was always nice to get to see a patrol officer in Troutdale working Sweetbriar Road in the middle, 2 a.m, and someone would be out coming home from work or out for a walk or something, and they would see Troutdale PD out there just trolling. And that non-discretionary time, how much non-discretionary time is being provided or is it all responsive time from the sheriff's office? Those are questions that you would have to answer. But to really get to the crux of your question, Ray, is going to be the relationship that you have with whomever the chief is serving for the sheriff's office, and being able to make sure that individual can make the changes quickly and to the satisfaction of the council and the community.
And I will have to say that even with Monty sitting in the room, that we have been blessed with great assignments of chiefs. You know, Monty, Travis Goldberg, who's now the chief of Gresham, Steve Bevins, who is now head of the River Patrol Division and used to be a Troutdale officer, and now Doug Asbell, who used to be a Fairview officer and sergeant. They've been great, but we can't guarantee that in the future. So that would be definitely something to, if we went with either Gresham or Multnomah County Sheriff and didn't have our own, that would be something to delineate in the contract, is that relationship. There is stuff in our current contract. I might want to throw more language in it just to make sure that that is a good relationship, and we have a little more say in who that person is. So it's a good idea.
You know, Ray, if I could just jump in a little bit too, you mentioned earlier that you're still paying for BOAC separately, or maybe it was Dave that said that. And I think that's something that, you know, you should be really concerned with, because when I retired in 21, and I know I don't think it has improved since then, is the length of time it takes them to answer their 911 calls. And I think when you're talking response times, that's got to be a critical component of it as well. And since you're paying for that service, those are numbers that if I was in your place, I'd want to be talking to them about.
Yes.
And can I add one thing to that Robin brings, and more of a question? Does someone from Troutdale, the city of Troutdale, not necessarily the chief of that from Multnomah County, but someone from Troutdale, still sit on the user board for BOAC?
Yeah, I think the cities have one person on the user board, but we have several people on the budget committee. So I think Seth at Wood Village and Eric Mueller at Gresham is on the budget committee for them. I don't know. I've got the city manager and mayor from Fairview in here.
Yeah, I mean, I attend the BOAC board meetings.
Okay.
Because to Robin's point, having, you know, Troutdale, we're here to talk about Troutdale today, but Troutdale, Wood Village, and Fairview should all have a seat at that user board table, so that they can address the concerns that probably haven't changed since I was there and Robin was there. So yeah. they've been there BOAC forever. And so making sure that you still have a place at the seat so that you can express your concerns and frustrations.
Yeah, because the numbers are, when I left, were just truly unacceptable whatsoever. But they'll tell you the same thing, is that staffing is an issue, and training a dispatcher takes almost as long as it takes for a cop, maybe even longer. So I sympathize with that, but you know, they're in a business, we're in a business. So, yeah.
I know that I'm concerned with BOAC because, you know, as a person that works at the school district, when we had an emergency, it was 7 minutes waiting for somebody to answer a call. It was faster for us to have a parent come get the child and take them to the hospital versus having somebody come to our child. So I didn't realize the separation, because if I call 911 and I have an emergency, I'm expecting a police officer or whoever coming. I don't think people realize it's a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. And so when they're complaining about, well, the police officer's not coming or the ambulance isn't coming, right? They're not realizing that 911 is a whole separate agency. I didn't know that until this last year personally. And so, because I have a lot of complaints with BOAC, lots of complaints. And so not necessarily with SMS, with our police officers, right? Because they do wonderful, they come to the school, they come in our community, I do see them around. But I think we need to really look at that in our contract in the future, that's for sure.
I think we do track those numbers as far as when the call's received, when it gets dispatched. And when an officer arrives.
We do, and they do as well.
Okay, so,
Yeah, BOA can provide that for you too.
but most likely is that citizens complain about our officers when really it's BOAC that's sitting on it longer than we'd like them to.
Probably a topic for, was it Bob? Bob to come back from BOAC and tell us, because he was about a year and a half ago he came, because yeah, it's a problem. Update the council on what has been happening with improvement in hiring and of course response time.
Jordan is here, just so you know, he's on the screen.
Yes, he's appeared.
Does anybody on the screen have any questions or comments? Jordan?
I would just comment along the same lines as Randy did, that it's all the different layers that we get with Multnomah County that we really got to take into effect. The detective services, the Hope team, everything else that comes along with Multnomah County that we're not going to be able to replacing with our own, that we really got to consider when we're getting into this. But I also know that this financial obligation is huge and they're going to be asking for a lot more money, and it has to be a balancing act as well. So we're going to have to really consider a lot when it's Gresham or Multnomah County or creating our own. It's a lot of different factors, but I just don't want to lose service. At the same time, though, I do want to keep or have more of a neighborhood policing going on as well. I do hear that all the time within my own community. So just my quick 2 cents.
Thank you. Paul? Anybody else have any questions about this or comments?
Question, I know that when we had our own police department, we contracted some things with the county. There was things that the county did for us,
The
some
sheriff's
services
office-
that they provided because we really couldn't do it.
I'm not sure. I mean, there's specialty teams in terms of like special weapons and tactics. I think you were somewhat involved in that as a multi-agency, task force or group. Same with vehicular crimes team. I don't recall, Dave might remember if there was any other type of contract between the sheriff's office and the city.
Yeah.
Specific partnerships and MOU-based agreements.
Yeah, I can talk to most of them. The one that I recall that we had to pay for that was more out of pocket was we contracted with the county's facilities to do some of the install on vehicles for radios and MDTs and that kind of thing. That was something that was a contractual service that we had with them. We had MOUs for major crimes team. So we had 2 officers, detectives assigned to major crimes. So if there was a major crime call out in East Multnomah County, one or both of our detectives would go to the call and provide service to whether it's Gresham or Fairview or whomever. And then if we had a major crime event within the city of Troutdale, that same team would come in and provide service to Troutdale. So it was and they probably still do have a very high functioning team with Gresham and Multnomah County. I don't know if that's expanded to Portland or not at this point in time. We also had somebody assigned to the vehicle crash team. So we provided training for one of our officers when I was there to become a reconstructionist. And so he was able to go out and do do a full reconstruction of an accident, he would get called out as part of the East County Multnomah, the East County vehicle crash team, and so he was part of that. So we participated with all of those MOUs and all of those services within East Multnomah County. I'm trying to think of other ones. We didn't have any dedicated child abuse investigators, and so that was one area we didn't have. We were part of this, I'm not sure what they call it now, SWAT CERT team. We had a couple, I think, one for sure, maybe two, assigned to the SWAT team. That was a very difficult process for them to go through. The testing of that was very complicated and difficult. The one that I know for sure was Joel Windland, and he ended up rising to the rank of captain at sheriff's office, I believe, and then retired. There may have been a second one, but I don't want to say because I'm not 100% sure. So we were involved in all of those specialty units, and so Jordan just made a comment that made me think of something, another statistic that you probably want to delve into a little bit, and because we did have detectives available within Troutdale. I don't know, as I sit here today, what that clearance rate was. But it would be interesting if that statistic is still available, what level of crimes they were investigating, what their clearance rate was compared to what's going on now. Is that, is that clearance rate higher, lower? Are some crimes not being investigated because they don't reach a certain threshold? So those are some things that you'd want to look at as well. So I know I told you at the very beginning I'm biased, so I like Robin with her former agency, with my former agency, we held our own. Yeah, we were a small agency. We didn't have 24/7 services in a lot of areas, primarily in the non-sworn area. But in the sworn capacity, we held our own. We did. We had, I think, when I left, we had 6 sergeants, and so we were trying to have 24/7 coverage. And so my structure was I wanted road supervision, so I had 6 sergeants and myself. When Scott took over, he restructured his team, and I think he ended up with the chief himself, a lieutenant, and then 4 sergeants. And so the structure was different. But I focused, when I was there, I did focus on having 24/7 coverage. Now we didn't have it every day because of sickness or vacations or what have you, but we would put an officer in charge. So we did have supervision. That was one area that was addressed earlier. I forgot to mention. So I think that's it for me.
And I guess a follow-up is, okay, so like it was mentioned like the Hope team, and I know that's a county service versus like a sheriff service. And so like some of these services, which ones, can we find out which ones would be provided for us because we're part of the county? And which ones would be because have a contract with the city of Troutdale? Makes sense?
Yeah, I don't know what the Hope team is, so that would be for maybe Chief Asbo to sort through, or maybe Monty knows. I don't know. I don't know what the Hope team is.
Well, we created what was originally called the homeless outreach team. I want to say that was back in 2013, 2014, the acronym HOPE, homeless outreach
Programs
engagement.
Yeah.
So I believe it's still a 2 law enforcement deputy, but they have some added capacity in terms of clinicians or outreach workers that assist the deputies. But I'm not overly familiar, Chief Asbo.
Well, from what I know, yeah, currently there are 2. It's Deputy Hidalgo and Deputy Billy's last name? Epperson. Yeah, are the Hope team currently. It is something, again, it's like one of those added services that's not really in our contract, but as you point out, Tanny, it's something they provide to the whole county. However, the way it works, quite frankly, is I think the Hope Team probably spends 50% of their time in East County, including the 3 cities. Because Portland Police do their own work with the homeless in the city of Portland. I don't think the Hope Team spends a lot of time in the city limits of Portland. And there's not a lot of homeless people camping out on Savi's Island or up by Multnomah Falls. And so the density of the homeless people outside the city of Gresham, which has their own homeless office, and the city of Portland has their own homeless office, means that the Hope Team, we kind of get the benefit of that team in East County and the 3 cities more than what the contract actually lists as what we pay for. So, and they're really good. When I call, they're only on duty Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. But when they are, Captain Asdo sends them right out if we got an issue, or our resource deputy, Nick, if they're not available.
Which I think is great, but it's just like, which of those services would technically go away and which of them would still be provided by the county? Because I know a bunch of those are backfilled by Multnomah County.
Yeah, in the budget, I think there's always a budget kind of struggle to keep that in the budget, overall budget, yeah.
It's a specialty program.
Yeah, I think Philip
What I
had,
was gonna say is, so there's a question of whether it's.
hang on, Philip, I can make sure everybody can hear you.
Whether it's a regional service or a contracted service, right?
Mhm.
The other thing to consider, and you were just going there with it, is if the 3 cities pull out and the revenue that we provide MCSO, could they afford to maintain the Hope Team? So, it's already on an annual basis, there's a question about with the Multnomah County budgeting process of whether they can retain the 2 deputies plus a sergeant that are dedicated to Hope Team.
One more factor, I think, to keep in mind in this thing too, it's one of the factors to think about, is that as long as we have this contract with the sheriff's office, we lease them this building. And we had the advantages of having 24/7 offices in there, but we also have close proximity to all of the patrol division right in downtown Troutdale, which has, so every deputy that goes out to the gorge, goes to Savi's Island, goes to the nursery fields of South Multnomah County, they all drive our streets, drive through some of the neighboring streets. And that you can't put a dollar figure on that value of having a fair amount of deputies who are not paid for by the city, who are in the city or near the city in case there's a problem. I will tell you that I've watched them when they're going through the city. If a traffic violation happens in front of them, they're probably not pulling somebody over because their mind is thinking, my duty's out here, Savi's Island. But if we have a serious event, as Monty will testify to, well, you're not under oath, so just speak to, they'll stay here in town and they'll go to it. So
I'm sure there's a tremendous enhanced presence since the contract renewal in terms of patrol, marked patrol vehicles, whether it be what we maintain with the labeling of travel police cars, they stay the same. Yeah, at any given time we have 8, 9 districts, and deputies are going out on patrol from roll call. So definitely enhanced visibility to and from, and when we have a high priority call and they happen to be here at roll call, you're gonna get the greatest amount of response, but at the same time with shifting of resources in we call it 50 district and 40 districts, there's better efficiency in terms of coverage.
Rich?
I would agree. Having them here is an excellent advantage. What I wanted to bring up is we have a wonderful panel list of chiefs here, and thinking outside the box, what would be the top things they would do to improve public safety in this area?
Well, I think it starts with, just maintaining your minimum level of staffing. Staffing challenges persist throughout the country. And I think as long as you're addressing data in terms of the number of incidents, the types of incidents, the crash data. You know, at times you can have these sort of unique quality of life issues that sometimes persist, the houseless issues that have been here. So whenever you take a look at different areas of budget, you know, we mentioned the HOPE team in terms of a specialty. When we create the budget, we're talking about those core services and the emergency services to 911 calls, and that's a priority. But the other areas of investigations and enforcement of issues like child exploitation issues, you want to provide the best quality of service that you can. So maintaining your core missions, you know, your patrol, your river patrol. For the sheriff's office, we also have other functions that we have to maintain in terms of civil process, those sorts of things. But maintaining staffing is what is the priority. And if you can go above and beyond that to address quality of life, livability issues for the community, to do something like has happened since I left, and having deputy wars or community resource definitive was a great improvement. So to get those other ancillary positions to address specific needs, that's what I think would be a priority.
Are there things that tie your hands from doing the job that you know you could do?
Say what?
Are there things that tie the hands of law enforcement from doing the job they know they could do?
Doing the job, well, right now, I think nothing really comes to mind. We're going through this accreditation process where locally and through the state, we're trying to meet, I think it's 115 different standards. So it's a good thing in terms of, you know, progressing, standardized, sort of this cohesion in terms of our local law enforcement. We all have these certain specific written standards that we all have to abide by. So I think that's an improvement in terms of, you know, our agencies being to work together under the same similar policy. You know, we have a different way that we develop policies between the sheriff's office and Portland and Gresham. So, but I think accreditation is something that you're going to see it's going to have an improvement in terms of our operations. And you should feel that in the community and receive the feedback from the constituents.
Any of the other panelists? Chiefs?
You know, two things come to mind for me. One of the things is community engagement and having your officers visible and out in the public. Law enforcement is a team sport, and we can't do it by ourselves. And there's so many times that we get information from our community. And when you have a smaller community like Troutdale, you have the opportunity to have almost everybody know somebody in the police department. And I think that's really important because you develop that rapport, you get a good relationship, and they're going to give you information when you truly need it. So I think that's one thing. Now that I'm no longer in Multnomah County, I think I can say I believe that having a district attorney that is willing to prosecute all levels of crime is incredibly important. And I don't know that that's occurring these days. So I think that's important. When you say what ties our hands, I think that's a big one.
Yeah, to your first question, I kind of alluded to this earlier. I would look at the amount of discretionary time officers have versus the committed time that they have. What that means is on the committed or response times that they have, when they're receiving calls for service, they're taking self-initiated activities or doing traffic stops, or they're out doing a speaking engagement, or they're out going to a school or something where they're actively engaged in an activity, versus that discretionary time where they can simply be on patrol, be in the neighborhoods, be out talking to residents, being on patrol. And that is something that we looked at when I was chief, is what our discretionary time was and our non-discretionary time. And certainly our night shift, graveyard shift had more discretionary time than a day shift, but we looked at it by shifts. And that is something that you can measure. That is something that I think is beneficial to reducing some of the problems within a community because they're visible. I'll steal Robin's phrase, it's a team sport. By having the officers out in the community and by invisible and prevention is very helpful. So I think looking at that discretionary and non-discretionary time is very important. And I'm sure that's, if I could pull it up in 2005 to 2008, I'm certainly that the statistics are available now to be able to pull that up now and see how much discretionary and non-discretionary time spent within the city. To the second question about what ties law enforcement's hands, I would say I don't live in Multnomah County either, so I'll say that you need a new district attorney, and I'll be that blank appointed. There are some legislative changes that are impacting law enforcement across the state, and so I think working with your state legislators is always a good use of your time to, if there's a bill being introduced that has negative impacts to law enforcement or an unfunded mandate for law enforcement, we'll talk about Monty's work that he's doing now and what work I did way back when, the accreditation. It's a great program. I'm 100% behind it. We voluntarily did it when I was there. I believe in it wholeheartedly, but it's an unfunded mandate by the state. And so at least that was my understanding of it. Monty, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but it's an unfunded mandate by the state that departments shall be accredited. And when I was in Troutdale, it took us 2.5 years to become accredited because there were financial components to it, specifically our property and evidence room. We had to go through 2 budget cycles to be able to fund and fix what we needed to fix in the property and evidence room. And it took 2 budget cycles to do that. So there are some financial costs to accreditation. So those are some of the things that tie law enforcement's hands right now. I think it was Rich that asked that question, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, is there a ratio you like to see on discretionary versus non-discretionary time? You ever feel?
Ideally, 40% non-discretionary time was the kind of the goal that we were having at that way back when I was there. So if you look at a 10-hour shift, ideally 4 hours of that time was non-discretionary, where they were actually out on patrol in the neighborhoods, engaging with people, doing preventative work, and spending time in the community on patrol.
Do you know what legislative changes impact the most?
What legislative changes impact us the most?
Yeah.
Terrible law changes.
Yeah, I mean, it can be anything from changing in a mandatory sentencing to a decriminalization of illegal drugs. I think if you want to spend an hour on that, we can do that, but you probably don't. But that was a huge.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Yeah, Measure 110, I think, and we had.
Measure 110 is probably providing a lot of calls for service for your HOPE team, would be my guess, because a lot of folks from across the country moved into Oregon when Measure 110 passed. Unfunded mandates I already mentioned, so I could probably go on for quite a while on that, but you probably don't want me to.
So yeah, I just Chairperson, is there, I don't know, we've really gotten a lot of information from these 3, and they've been very generous with their time. So unless there's anything more, maybe the committee wants to
go on to number 5.
Release them.
Yeah,
Yes.
so thank you, chiefs.
Of course.
We appreciate it, and thank you for your service to your communities.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you all.
All right, thank you very much. Good luck with your
Thank you.
process.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marty. You should have a cup of coffee, just call me.
I'm coming for my coffee.
I know, Robin, come to town. And another south of Sun River, Dave, same thing for you, for Dave. He's gone.
He's gone.
Gone to watch Monday Night Football or the baseball game.
See you,
Fine,
Monty.
thank you. Okay, so number 5 is discussion on additional information related to police service. Right.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have to answer all the questions from this committee, but basically the committee's supposed to come up with all the questions that council should start pursuing. So is there any more information though you need to help you come up with the questions that council should be exploring? Is there something more? I thought there was a lot of good information tonight, things to think about.
I think we've been we've been the benefactors of a lot of years of institutional knowledge and experience, not only tonight, but then our last meeting with the fire staff.
Yeah.
Sorry, Twyla.
Yeah, one thought that I had when listening to everybody was they kept coming back to, in addition to like the people out on patrol and such, is the community piece. And so I'm just wondering with our current contracts, like what that looks like on like any support for neighborhood watch or, you know, things in addition to the actual policing that we can do to help maintain the safety of our communities and have that kind of community policing feel. That piece kind of was missing for me.
Yeah, and I do know Neighborhood Watch isn't a part of the police department. That's more of a separate organization that works in neighborhoods, right? I mean, we had a Neighborhood Watch when I was a kid in Gresham, and we even had I can't remember what it was called, but the placards you would have in your window that your house would be certified by the police department that says if someone's in danger, they can go knock on that door, right?
Yeah.
We had that when we were a kid, but it wasn't necessarily a police program, even though they background checked my parents, I guess.
Yeah.
We talked about it a little bit at a council meeting before, and I think we touched on it on our first meeting about neighborhood watch programs, and that's not necessarily a program by the police department. I wanted to talk a little bit about the meeting that Ray and I had with Chief Morrissey O'Donnell last week, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, we had coffee with her. I'll say that I started that meeting by saying that I was very appreciative of the service that the Sheriff's Department gives us. With that being said, and we can talk about the meat and potatoes of what we actually talked about that day, but after Ray left, he left me with the sheriff by myself. And I asked her the question that I've been wanting to ask her for a long time, is if we don't pay, you're still Multnomah County Sheriff. We're still a Multnomah County city. What does that look like? What does that look like if we don't sign a contract with you? And if we just are a part of Multnomah County and the Sheriff's Department just patrols Multnomah County, what does that look like? She stated, obviously that would be a mistake. Don't do that. Don't not pay the contract. Don't, obviously if we decide to go another route, that's fine. But she says, while we're with her, don't not pay for the contract, continued with the partnership and continued with the services. She did say there would be a drastically, a less amount of sheriff deputies inside the city limits at all times. Something that Ray touched on with us leasing them this building right now. We're fortunate to have them mobilize here in the beginning, middle, and end of their shifts. That means that at any point in time, we have the maximum the force of the Sheriff's Department in the city limits of Troutdale in East County a few times during the day. Now, granted, we might be leaving for shifts or departments that they're working in otherwise patrolling Troutdale, but they're still here. She wasn't too upfront as to what programs would stop. I don't think the Hope Team is a program specifically dedicated or funded by Troutdale contract, but what Mr. Morley stated is a real thing. If Troutdale pulls out, and by extension, if Wood Village and Fairview pull out, then programs like the Hope Team, you would have to assume, or you could assume that they would then go away because they couldn't, maybe they wouldn't be able to afford those programs if we backed out. But who knows? That's a guessing game. But like I said, I appreciate the service and the level of service that we get. Can it be better? Absolutely, 100%. I've come home 3 times in the past 8 years being on council and seen a sheriff's deputy in my neighborhood after hours. After hours as in after a council meeting, 10 p.m. And it was nice, but at the same time, it was, what happened? Why is there a sheriff's deputy in my neighborhood? But it was nice to know that they were out there in Troutdale. You know, they don't know where I live. They were near the elementary school, and it was nice to have them there. I think we're fortunate to be recipients of a lot of the specialized training that the Sheriff's Department gets regularly. But then also what we kind of touched on a little bit, the local control is the huge thing. My biggest drawback and point to having this conversation is we have zero say unless we enter into a contract or negotiations to add another community resource officer. We have zero say as to what the focus of the Sheriff's Department is.
Right, so the nice thing is we have a contract. They're required to provide what the contract says. And we don't get that if we're just, we're off the grid in terms of whatever the sheriff decides they have the ability to staff for this part of the county.
We don't have a say right now, even though we are in a contract, on who our chief is. Not that we've had a bad chief or a better chief that we hoped for, but we don't have a say in that. We don't have a say in the focus of a program like the Hope Team. We don't. It's geared towards homeless outreach and program engagement, but that's driven by the commission, and that's driven by the whims and the political will of a board that, frankly, in my opinion, doesn't share the same values that Troutdale does. So it's difficult to sit back and just give millions of dollars to a sheriff's department. With all due respect for the deputies and Chief Morrissey O'Donnell, it's difficult for me to only have that as our decision making, or our decision, when it's difficult to also align their values to the values of Troutdale. So
I guess my question would be, why don't we have a say?
it's not in the contract.
Well, the say, you're talking about why don't we have a say now?
Well, why don't we have, I mean, if they're Multnomah County, we're in Multnomah County, why do the cities not have a say in?
Technically, really quick, technically we do, because we elect our representative on the county commission. Lori Stegman is our representative. She's our say with regards to all things Multnomah County.
How does that work?
And she spent a lot
How
of
does that
time,
work?
yeah, and she spent a lot of time pushing for a Corbett assigned deputy for a district up there. And she had to advocate to get that. I can't imagine what the world will look like if the 3 cities says, hey, let's just try it with, we're in the county, provide coverage, what we would get when we're only 20% of the board.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that at all.
Oh, yeah.
I'm saying, what would you get if you didn't have a contract? Because when we had our own police, we still had the county roaming around.
There should be a base level of support that we get
Well,
anyway.
there's county roaming around in Gresham. There's
Right.
county roaming around in Portland,
And, and so it's kind of like, what would that look like?
Mhm.
You know, instead of 2 officers, would you have 1? Would you have a quarter of 1? Would you have what would you have? And I respect the heck out of these guys, and I think they do a great job, but to me, this place is a hub. And a lot of times they're jetting in and out of here. And they're really not paying that close of attention to what's going on here as much as where they're going at that time. And, our leadership has been a turnstile at best.
Yeah, but it's a good question. I'm making a list of all the things that the council should consider, like asking, what is our freebie baseline of law enforcement coverage without a contract that anybody who lives in unincorporated Multnomah County gets just for living in the county, because we all pay property taxes that covers Multnomah County Sheriff's Office
I
already.
just got mine in the mail today.
Lucky you. So that's a
And we
good
pay a
question to
lot
ask.
to the county.
Yeah.
And I don't know, former Counselor Allen, was that ever part of the discussion in 2014 when this whole started? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was, and it has a lot to do with, I think it was seniority and how they pick where they want to work, right? There's a,
With regards to
well,
who the chief is?
yeah, I'm not sure exactly if the chief is part of that, but they do get, I remember we had discussions about, we wanted the same officers all the time so that they can build relationship with the community and so forth. And we didn't want to change that so often, but they have within their contract how they're going to divvy up responsibilities within the deputies. And that may be part of that, where there's a seniority-based pecking order to where officers get first choice of what they want.
Also,
Sorry, Karen, let's have it.
we talk about all the services, right? And what can and can't be provided, but the other thing is, cities smaller than us have their own police department.
Mhm.
And cities larger than us do. How do they do it? If this is so complicated, we might not be able to do it. How are these other cities doing it, and how are they accomplishing it? I know a number of other cities that have better service. Yes, they pay more. I just do it on population, right? Take what they're charging and do it based on population. And they're paying more, but certainly it's a higher level of service.
I will tell you, one of the things that they suffer from in those smaller communities is I've seen it in a lot of different cities around the state, because I get all the emails from the other city managers, the quality of the staffing that you have. If you've paid attention to the problems they had over in West Lynn the last couple of years with lawsuits and people being fired and poor quality. Right now, I know the city of Jervis is going through a real problem with their police department. There's like three other cities that are always having what's the best word, scandal or something regarding, because it's really because of the quality of the people they end up hiring to fill the roles in those cities, because of salaries are low, opportunities are low, who wants to live there kind of stuff. And so that's what you pay for sometimes, is that.
No, and I think that's true to a point, because like I talked to a couple of our officers after the merger, right?
Yeah.
Call it a merger, buyout, sales, whatever it is. But talked to a couple of them and they said, hey, the pay increase was great, but I'm on a max train now.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm working at the county jail. That might be an opportunity, I guess, but those guys didn't look at it that way.
Well, some got opportunities and some got, kind of the
Sentenced.
less desirable,
Yeah, it's just one of those things, if you talk to them now, the ones that are left are like Bevins and, well, Joe Sturgey still works for us. And, he was one of the transition ones.
Jordan,
Oh, he's got his hand up. Okay.
Yeah, he does.
Cute little hand.
Backing the bus up a little bit, and we're talking about chiefs and contracts. I know, Ray, you brought it up several times about there's a certain amount of time that the chief is supposed to have devoted in the contract to Troutdale, correct? But
Yeah, we're supposed to have 66% of a command staff person works for the city of Troutdale as our chief. And Monty, we've left already, but I will tell you that all four of them will tell you, I'll just be even generous. I don't think all four of them ever spent more than 20% of their time on city of Troutdale business. And part of the problem is they have a full-time job, like Captain Asbo, he's the regular patrol commander. He's in charge of the whole patrol division, which has, what do we say, how many districts did he say? 9 districts? And he's responsible for all that too. And so how much time does he have to spend with us? So that's one of the things that I've noted.
so even though it's in the contract, we can't even hold them to the contract.
Well, we have commented to them that issue. And the issue is, well, what more do you want them to do? Well, honestly, I have them do a lot more, but it's a long discussion because they still have their other duties to do there, and the sheriff's office would either keep them their duties, and they'd be working 70 hours a week, and I don't want to burn out our chief. Well, then you got to spend more time going to these meetings. You have to go do this. It's just, yeah.
But if we're paying for
Right.
it, and they're not providing it, they're still not honoring our contract that's already written.
They'll say, well, we're paying for a HOPE team that you get benefit of. You know, they're gonna say, we pay, you're not paying for this, that we benefit you, you know. They'll come up with other, and that's why I said, if we do another contract with the sheriff's office, we've learned a lot. It's the first time we've done it. So, you know, admittedly, we learned a lot in these 8.5 years, and definitely the next negotiation, they'll be wanting more money, but we'll be wanting more accountability and the real time devoted to our city.
And I would even go further to say that we were the canary in the mine shaft for the other East County cities as well, because we were the first ones to do it. And so I think we learned a lot. Other cities, municipalities learned a lot from what we've done. They've learned a lot from what they're currently in. And I think if we do decide as a council or as a committee to put it forth to the council, and then again, by extension, the council to enter into a negotiation again, I think these are all things that are going to come up next time.
Now, one of the things that we benefited from, and Port Fairview didn't, is that about a year ago, they had a new union contract with the Deputies Association. The contract gave them something like a 4.5% cost of living increase and a 4.5% just market adjustment increase to keep them competitive. And I saw the charts, competitive with the other, other agencies. And our contract forbid them from asking us for more than the 4.5% cost of living. But I understand Fairview got hit with the full 9% increase based upon that. And we didn't have to. So I know the county's going to come back next contract and say, hold it now. We got to make sure that, these increases, we always want to make sure there was a cap. For that kind of increase, there wasn't a cap with Fairview. Am I kind of relating that generally, Philip, correctly?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. So they did come and ask us, and we said, come to council and ask. We haven't seen them in 6 months.
I think it'd be important that the city council really look at the services we're getting from BOAC. That really needs to be a consideration for our citizens, I think.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree. And the only thing I'll add to that is that it's really separate from what we're talking about here. But trust me, it's a huge concern. It's a huge concern. I've written, I don't know how many letters to BOAC. Ray's written a letter. I know Mayor Cooper wrote a letter. Wood Village signed on to one.
Because I mean, me not knowing that there's a difference, only finding out there really is a difference. No, there's not a lot of people of our county that knows that it's a difference. They think it's together.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at a contract, people are may come up and say, how are you addressing this? And they're gonna think it's part of the police and it's part of, everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think people know that it's separate.
I would say when people come up to you in the neighborhood and say that, I would give them Bob Cousy's email address and say, email the director of the Bureau of Emergency Communications. Say, be better. But I mean, at the same time, it's going to be the same answer and argument from them that we get from everybody. It's all staffing. It all comes down to staff. I'm not going to speak for them because I don't know the intricacies of staffing at BOAC, and I'm not going to presume that I do. But with regards to my industry, there's no one that wants to do the work anymore. There's no one that wants to do hard work anymore. And so when it comes down to staffing an effective 911 call center, there's no one that wants to do that anymore. Not no one. The pool is small. It's a kid's waiting pool. It's a kiddie pool that's on sale at Walmart. You can only stick so many people or pull so many from there. But, it's a culture shift. And that shift that got us to where we're at it also will change. And we're going to go the other way. Just right now, we're in the pits of it. So
I'd also like to kind of say, I remember the feeling of when we went over to MSCL, and I wasn't happy. And a lot of the citizens were not happy.
Mhm.
They weren't happy with the whole negotiation. Although I love our police officers, I feel like we've been really blessed with them here, but I remember the feeling, and the feeling wasn't a good one.
Mhm.
And so I think city council needs to kind of remember that too.
Mhm.
Yes, we were the first one that did it, but then also remember the feelings of those of us that are still here.
Yep.
And then I'm assuming you guys are talking to Fairview and Wood Village, and getting their input of what, do we look at going 3-city? Do we look at just remaining
Well,
with the contractor? I mean, I think that's a lot of things that we have to look.
it is, but I mean, we have a city manager from Fairview and the mayor of Fairview here. I mean, we can, if they're up to it, we can have a conversation with them for a couple minutes. If the board,
Okay.
yeah. I know I would be interested. I mean, what's our budget right now that we pay yearly to MCSO for our
Almost
contract?
5.
Almost 5, right?
4.6, I think,
Yeah.
is what this year is.
So
And to be clear, this wasn't a budgetary issue at the time.
no, I mean, it was kind of, I wasn't here. I didn't help make the decision, but it was kind of looked at as the big HERS monster that was coming down the road, right? That
Well,
it's
which
some,
the budget committee never saw it and said, Houston, we have a problem.
Mhm.
That's correct.
Okay, it went to the council, and that was how it was decided.
Mhm.
Well, the council didn't see it as a financial issue. Well, not a budgetary issue, right?
No,
Um,
but that's how it was
Mhm.
flavored. But I'll say the community, I think, is still pretty salty.
Yeah, I would say there's still, I mean, I probably get, I don't know, maybe 2 emails a year about this building and how people feel that they were let down, lied to, and betrayed by the city.
They were.
Yeah,
I went door to door
right. But
for this
my-
building for weeks.
Yeah, and my point in saying that is, I feel I've never gotten a nasty email about going from Troutdale Police to MCSO. And I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm just saying, I think people equate that decision to what we did with this building as opposed to switching to MCSO, in my opinion, in the information that I've gotten over the years.
I would just say, I get the sense that they liked, whether you could go back to it or not, they liked what we had before better.
Yeah.
I mean, I know in the budget committee every year, and didn't we get that in the first meeting, to hand that out, where we had maybe not, the estimation of taking the budget from 2014 for our police department and then increasing it percentage-wise based upon inflation and what it's likely we'd be paying now for our own police department, just at that same staffing level, but just with inflation versus what we're paying for the sheriff's office. Why don't I find it and send it to everybody again, just to have that? I know Eric makes that as part of the budget presentation.
Yeah, and you don't know what all of your costs would be, but there is a certain benefit to having the infrastructure in place.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is. So I'll get that sent off to everybody. I think the question now, though, is that, I mean, I gave you those 2 sheets that kind of like, these are the questions that should be discussed, or studies that should be done, or consultants that should be done. And I'm wondering if on those lists, I mean, I sat here writing them down, adding them to the police one, going, gosh, we should get a consultant who evaluates our current level of service for a city of our size and the service calls and says, what do they recommend regarding what our service level should be based on other cities? Finding out the discretionary versus non-discretionary report from the sheriff's office, getting time in district report. I mean, what percentage time do they spend in district as opposed to roaming?
I was gonna say, in district and not just driving
Roaming.
Halsey out of district.
Right, and of course, what would be the level of service? I know you talked about last time. What would be the level of service if we didn't have a contract? What would we get in a district with this many people? What would the county provide for that? So what I'm thinking is I'm taking these and putting them on a list, and we have one more meeting and we finalize the list. But if anybody has anything to add to the fire list or the police list that we don't have it already, tell me now, and then I'll bring back a draft to the next meeting. And the next meeting can just be talking through, what do we want to report to council? What should we tell council they should be doing now to know what they need to know to make some decisions? Does that seem fair? I mean, that's kind of like trying to get us to that point.
Yeah, but can we, I mean, what are you guys looking at for your city?
Well, we're
Yeah.
Yes, please, can you please
Yeah.
come forward?
considering that's what we tell everybody in our chambers. Get up on the mic.
State your name and city of residence for the record, please.
Actually, I was gonna do that.
Not Troutdale, how about that?
Yes, we have the mayor of Fairview, Keith Kudra, and the city manager, Phil Marley.
Glad to be here, everybody. And, we're still early in this, and we're looking at very much the same issues as you are. And one of the things that the mayor and I were just talking about is, the value in collaborating between the three cities on both fire and law. It may be tougher on the law side with with Wood Village, in that they have a sweetheart deal contractually at this point. But Fairview, which is compared to Troutdale, you're what, 16,000-ish? We're 10,500. So we spend currently we spend 2.9 million dollars a year on law enforcement.
And just so you'll know, Wood Village, they're living on a legacy contract that's about, Greg always calls it a page long, and they just come when they call, 911. So basically, I don't think they get any guaranteed coverage at all, anything.
But they're 1 square mile, and they're surrounded by
MCSO.
Well, by Troutdale and Fairview.
Yeah.
But would you really
And
want to
some
be
of
Wood
which-
Village?
No argument there, moving on, that's a given.
We love Wood Village there.
Because we'd have to drive through it to go see you wonderful people.
Yeah.
And to a certain degree, we're dealing with the same issues where you guys came in and you may have been the canary in the mine shaft. We were the last ones to the table, so I don't think we got as good of a deal either. So it's pick your poison on which one you want. I don't think any of us got a really good deal. I was 3 months on the council when we signed this deal, so I was catching up fast. But from the jump, it was always my goal and always my desire to negotiate something with the three cities, because I always felt that was the only way we were going to financially survive this, is if we can stop negotiating on ourselves and on our own and start working as a unit on this, and to get some more unified coverage. To the conversation of people being upset, we had the exact same thing. But I think people tend to romanticize the past. I really do. I think they tend to forget the potholes that were in existence, because quite frankly, we had a pretty good society when we had our own police forces. We did not have the problems we're having today. And it's really easy to look back there and say, well, we had it great then, we should have it great now. And we had a high amount of turnover in our police force. One of our more beloved officers left Fairview Police Force long before we ever left. But of course, his name was brought up every time, as far as we miss Neil O'Donnell. I hate to break it to you, Neil O'Donnell left 3 years before that. And now he's with OLCC. He's shifted again. So people tend to remember what they want to remember and not take a look at it from a holistic lens. And that's not to say they're wrong. They're absolutely right. They have every right to have the feelings that they have. But I don't know about you guys, but we're also battling a visibility aspect. People swear that they don't see any MCSO cars around ever. When we had Fairview Police Force, we had them around all the time. Now we don't see them at all. Okay, I don't know if that's a perception issue or what, but I'm not sure if you guys deal with that, but we hear that a lot. But certainly, first on my list is or one of the first things is, I'd love to negotiate something with the three cities.
I think that would be, if we decide to move forward with a renegotiation, I think I think negotiating with the 3 cities, or I'm not sure if Wood Village is gonna wanna negotiate with the 3 cities.
Yeah.
It might just be 2.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what? 2 life rafts stranded together are better than 2 life rafts apart.
Mhm.
And I feel that's
Why-
where we're at.
That's why I don't go in the ocean.
I would agree that there is an advantage to that. And Fairview and Troutdale are fairly similar demographics and the way the cities are ran and so forth. So it's a natural. I would agree that I don't think Wood Village would change their current deal.
If it
And
ain't
why
broke.
would you, right? It wouldn't be in their best interest.
Yeah.
Where are you getting the fire from?
Gresham, we have Gresham as well.
And all 3 of us.
Yeah, actually, we're on the same contract. All 3 of us signed the same contract. So we do have a joint contract with Gresham Fire. But see, fires run fundamentally different than police. You don't have fire trucks roaming the streets just
No, you
looking for
don't.
something to do. They're all strictly dispatch. While police are different, and presence, a passive enforcement, like they talked about, the fact that all these police cars drive through downtown Troutdale, come to the intersections, people see cars all the time in downtown, and it's not very attractive for bad guys to be here. That's passive enforcement. Just having them around has some value to that, so.
So Ray, Greg, and I have had a number of conversations about fire service, and I think there's an active interest in collaborating on that as well.
We
with
do.
the 3 cities.
Honestly, in the community, it's been my observation that we do bump into far more sheriff patrols now than we did before the contract. Right, they do have more of a
good.
presence. Like when you go to lunch in different places, you bump into them.
I cheat. I go to the coffee shop they all go to.
Yeah, well, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I always see a lot of them at burrito shop for dinner, or good coffee, or celebrate me home for morning coffee. I mean, they're in town a lot more often than they were before, absolutely.
You would hope.
I notice them in town, and they do really come when you call. I mean, but they never patrol the neighborhoods. Never, ever do I see them patrol. You're right. What happened in my neighborhood? And it is, something happened if I see one in my neighborhood.
Well, that's something
Never
question.
do I see them patrol.
I'm wondering if we could just get some random GPS locates on our District 60 or 70 car, just to see where they went during a shift, just to kind of get a feel for that. That's a good question. I think District 70 is
You're
up
gonna
on
get a
the-
letter from the union.
But it kind of goes along with that roaming or that discretionary, non-discretionary time. It's just kind of, is that perception, like you said, Keith, or is it reality that they're really not going off Troutdale Road, checking out?
Yeah, I see them on
Rich's house.
Troutdale Road all the time, but I live off of Troutdale. I never see them unless something happens.
Now, in our contract, do we not have a police officer that stays here?
Our community resource officer, Nick Board.
Well, stay here. They staff 2 districts, District 60 and 70. 70, I believe, is the one up on the hill. All the residential areas up there. District 60 is down here, downtown McMinimum's and the truck stops in that area. So there's 2 deputies 24/7 on the road all the time, which is what we've had for 30 years as our base level of law enforcement in Troutdale. And then 3 years ago, we added another 40-hour position, which is our community resource deputy, which is Nick Bohr. He works 40 hours a week, Monday through Thursday, 10 hours a day, and his only assignment is he's in Troutdale those 40 hours. You try to, if there's a call in Fairview because there's a bank robbery, you guys have a bank in town?
Yeah.
Okay, we do. He'd respond to that, just like any other deputies would respond to a big call like that. So, again, that's why one of the questions is to look at, is there ways to not increase our sworn coverage, but maybe increase law enforcement type coverage in the city? So we don't have to, because it is very expensive it's like $240,000 a year, I think now with inflation is what we're paying annually for the one 40-hour week position. And then the other thing I've thought about, I've been thinking through these things, is if you went with multiple sheriff, we've got the 950 hours, basically half of a full-time person is supposed to be at the beach in the summer, and we don't need somebody in the beach all summer long, that much coverage down there, but maybe take that, double it to a full-time position, and then have them do beach stuff on the weekends when it's busy or hot down there, but the rest of the time they're doing other patrol stuff, traffic, working with Nick, the other resource deputy, and they work different hours overlap. Maybe that's how you get better coverage in town. There's just different ways, and that's one of the things on the list is, how can we create a different way of doing what we're doing now with the deputies that are there? And like I think I've suggested before to several of you, maybe we add another code compliance officer. Maybe we add a park ranger position that patrols the parks, the observe and report, the mall cop kind of thing, but has a connection to the sheriff's deputies on patrol, so we have eyes on the ground in places that maybe we need more watching. I mean, those are different things to think about that might give us a better eyes on the street. Or neighborhood watch, get that organization, figure out how we set up our own and get our citizens to get involved in it. I think, did the sheriff's office, did they have cars that they loaned out to?
That was their, what was that, their community?
We had
Resource.
We had a reserve officer program here that
Right.
hung out at the river and did patrols and so forth. It's basically,
I think that ended in 2019.
it ended with the contract, and then they talked about doing it again, and they might have done it for a while, but I don't see it anymore, so.
The issue for them at this point is the ability to put civilians through the training they need to do, and while they've been staffing up, they've been full bore on their own internal training and haven't had the capacity to do the citizen, I've forgotten the term for it, but the citizen volunteers.
Oh, kind of like Corbett does this.
Yeah.
We had reserve officers, which kind of created a funnel for getting new officers in the future, because they developed that relationship and did some of the work and so forth. And so it was a good program. It's sad to see it go, but yeah.
Are those some of the things we could put into contractual language, like the addition of some of those programs or their support and continuing those? Because that, I think, changes that community feel. And
it may be difficulty of requirements, right, for accreditation and stuff. I don't know.
It's one of the things is those two things is in the contract, I guess that's the thing to make sure that whoever we contract with, if we don't do our own department, is how do we define our relationship with the assigned chief and the city manager? For liability reasons, they can't give us any real command and control in their command structure, but how do we get the resource officers helps? And the other way is in the contracts, maybe how to control roaming, only on a priority 1 or 2 call may a deputy leave the city, or something, I don't know what the parlance is, but something like that.
You do have to have something, because they do get distracted quite a bit.
Yeah, and so, and how do we put some things in a contract? I guess that's one of the things to do too, is what terms should we beef up in a contract with a third-party agency that would help make sure we get what we're paying for?
How do we find out what we're getting today versus what we're paying for?
Service level?
Yeah, I mean, clearly.
Oh, as far as the contract?
Yeah.
I mean, that comes down to having a discussion with our chief and compare it to what the contract, I mean, he's been upfront with his, where we're at. I mean,
you can do
well, Ray's already said that, he doesn't think the chief's here as much as what we're paying for.
Right.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not because they don't want to be, or.
No, I'm not saying
It's
that.
because they just have so many other things that do, their duties at the sheriff's office, they just can't spend that much time. I mean, it's one of those things is like, you develop a system where they're just not available that much to do stuff, so you just don't ask them to do stuff. I mean, I will say Monty was really good, and I think his assignments are a little bit less than our last couple chiefs has been. So when we had a citizen call, and this was before we had a resource deputy, have a concern, he'd go out, drive out to the citizen in a neighborhood and talk to him personally and chat with them. And that's a service we could probably use more relationships with our businesses, going through our neighborhoods, maybe spending time as the chief, just going through the neighborhood, stopping, at Victoria's house and saying, how you doing? You feeling safe today? I mean, really, I'm halfway kidding, but not.
Well,
Maybe that's what we would use that more time for.
just what if these guys, a third of their time is outside of Troutdale?
Yeah.
Okay, that's going from 3 to 2. That's huge. That's huge.
That's
You'd
the
probably have to
list of
go
things I'm
by-
making for this
You know.
committee is to say, let's find this out.
You'd have to go by who's assigned to you and how much time which calls are they responding to,
Right.
right? If they're assigned to you, but they're always responding to calls outside, well,
Right, if there's a deputy, let's just say District 70, and it's really boring that afternoon, nothing's going on, but somebody's got a domestic violence call over on the far reaches of Fairview. Oh, something exciting, I'm gonna go over there and back up the deputies over there, and not that he had to go or was told to go, but he's felt like backing, which is not bad to back somebody up, but he
yeah,
wasn't here to
not
say do
necessarily
traffic.
bad from a training aspect,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
and from helping the whole area be better. But how do you get better level of service that you're willing to pay for, if it all just kind of levels out or leaves? You do have to have some way of
Well, if we're not getting our
keeping
level
a handle
of
on that.
service, why should we be paying more?
But the issue is, how do you define that? I mean, they could show me all the numbers that say they had people on duty in these districts, and
where were they?
And this is one of the things to get is, and if the response times were the same as we had in 2014, then we're responding to all the calls. What aren't you getting that you were supposed to get is the question.
You had a comment?
Yeah, so Fairview City Council has asked some of those same questions over the last couple of years. And on a couple of occasions, MCSO has gone back and pulled together the GPS data on who was in the city, and they've been able to demonstrate, yes, you had the coverage that you asked for in terms of deputies within the city at the minimum staffing levels, and oh, by the way, you also get these additional services that we're not even counting here that also bring people in, and so actually we're providing you more service than you're paying for.
That's what they'll tell you.
Yeah, so that's the message that we've gotten, and we've seen the numbers. I mean, when we've done that on occasion, they say they can't do that on an ongoing basis, but they're willing to pull those numbers periodically.
And I realize 2023 is a different world. But when you look at, effort versus results, or whatever you want to call it, like an example would be my neighbor across the street has $12,000 worth of merchandise stolen from their home, burglarized. Nobody will come out and take a police report.
Right.
Okay. After a planning commission meeting, we have a domestic situation in the parking lot with a man and a woman. And we're getting in the middle of it, and the woman says, call the police. We come in here to get somebody. They tell us to call 911. Okay?
I didn't hear this story, right on their property.
Yeah, I know.
Our property, but we
And
lease it to
I
them.
guess it's kind of like, this is the program that we're running. And I'm just saying, these are isolated situations, but when this happens to somebody, they don't usually forget it.
Yeah.
And I can keep going, but I think it's just, and we talk about the Hope team. I'm on the board for the levy district, and they spend a fair amount of time on the Portland levy system. So they're not always in East County, they're in other parts too.
Sure.
But I think some of our citizens would give up the Hope team to have hope that they're gonna be safe.
I saw what you did there.
Yeah, that was good.
That was good, Tim.
They are a nice resource to have. Would we still have them even without a contract? I don't know, maybe, probably, who knows? But like today, we've got a camper that showed up again on the north side of I-84, behind a tent where he's loving some of the ODOT ground, and the chief's gonna send, Hope over there in the morning to talk to him. May not be able to post it according to ODOT, but you can have a conversation, which usually works, so.
I think the questions that Ray has, I think are good questions. And if we're gonna look at those questions or ask council to look at those questions, I think they're a good start.
Yeah, I'm happy before the next meeting, also put this in written form.
I think that would be
Send
great.
it to you, and then we meet one more time, and then we can finalize it, and if you have any more ideas, I'll give you a working copy, I'll email it to you in a week or so, so that you'll have it before the next meeting, plenty of time to think about it, and basically have, this is our recommendations to council, the things you need to answer.
Yeah, I think again, my biggest concern is local control. My biggest concern is we have a department that represents our community, right? Represents Troutdale, represents our livelihoods and well-being. Can we get that with MCSO? I think we can. Are we getting that now? No, not necessarily. I won't go as far as to say what Councillor Wittrin stated as we can't have the same level of service that we get with MCSO. I think we could. I think it'll take a generation to build up a police department that big, right? And then the old saying is, when's the best time to plant a tree? You know, yeah. You know, granted, we don't have the luxury of being able to go back, but we can only move forward if we make that decision to. Maybe we don't make that decision to. Maybe we go the route of negotiating with Fairview and Wood Village, and see if we have a stronger position to negotiate with Multnomah County as a 3 cities instead of a 1, right? Maybe we go forward with MCSO again, maybe we don't. But I think where local control can come back to Troutdale is, interestingly enough, in what Ray was talking about with an increase in our code compliance officers, FTEs, with the possibility of a park ranger. I think where a lot of our complaints are coming, and where I think local control really comes into play here, is we have a feeling that we don't necessarily have that community safety aspect anymore in Troutdale, right? We don't have our own police officers. We don't have people looking out for their hometown. But I feel like that control can come from Troutdale full-time employees, like another code compliance officer, a newly appointed park ranger for Troutdale. A lot of issues that people are concerned with these days stem around code issues. I have a problem with people parking their trailer out on Halsey. I have a problem with people camping in downtown Troutdale or over by the outlet malls. I have a problem with, people playing loud music after 10 o'clock. I need a sheriff's deputy there. They're not going to come to a loud call music every single time someone calls. But maybe a code compliance officer would. Maybe a code compliance officer can go out and enforce our time, place, and manner standards that we just added to our city charter, because it's part of our code now. A code compliance officer can go and be the first line of enforcing some of the things that make Troutdale.
Don't we have one?
We do. Maybe we need 2.
Oh, I see.
Maybe we need 2 now. Maybe that's something that we can look at in partnering with other cities and creating a more robust code compliance department and figuring a way. We already have agreements with our court. We cover Wood Village and Fairview for our court services. Maybe we wrap in code compliance as well and just create this wraparound city services regarding codes and compliance and enforcement. Maybe that's one way we get a small piece of local control back to our city, and then by extension, East County. Maybe that's one way we fight. I want to let your employee in. Maybe that's one way we get a little bit of that back from the county. We take some of that on ourselves. But that's going to take an active budget committee, and that's going to take an active council to see the importance of maybe that decision making going forward. And again, I'm not saying I'm opposed to any other talks with regards to what we're talking about. I'm just saying maybe that's also an option.
I think that was very well stated. Thank you.
A lot of options, really.
Yeah. I think that's the fortunate thing, is really we have a lot of options. We could choose to do our own police department. We can make that decision. Is it going to be as robust as the one we left the next day? No. Is it going to be close to it? No. But the only way to start is to start.
Right.
But maybe we're not there. Maybe we throw our 5 million and their 3 million and Wood Village's $14 together, and we come up with a police department, and this is its new house. Who says we can't do that? We could do that. But again, our service levels aren't going to improve by doing that right away, right?
No, you're gonna have to go through a period of time when it's gonna be really rough.
Yep, the Wild West.
But
Maybe
you
we
could
need a
get that.
Batman.
Somebody who does CrossFit.
So, Ray, I like the idea of you sending us the list of questions so we can kind of
Yeah.
roll over. Because I know I have some in my head, but my notes aren't making sense to me at the moment, so, and you may have already had it on the list. So I think
Yeah,
that
I've got a
would be
whole
great.
bunch tonight on the list to add to the police list, and I don't know that we have as many on the fire district side, but I'll resend that to you also.
Yeah.
On the fire district, last week I asked about the buildings and District 10 owns the building. Do they have enough equipment there?
Well,
I don't think they have
see, here's
any equipment.
I'm thinking, if all 4 cities, let's say the citizens voted to join a fire district, Fire District 10 would probably take over the Gresham Fire Department, and all their equipment would get transferred over, and that would be some part of a financial transaction that they would have to pay the city, for all the equipment that they buy from them, that we're all paying for. If just the city of Troutdale citizens approved it, but nobody else did, Fire District 10, I think Mike mentioned it, would probably just contract with Gresham Fire to provide the current service we have now, but it just no longer comes out of general fund for the city so that we can use those resources for parks, for more police force and things like that.
And we have some control.
Yes. Yeah, because we would have somebody on the board of Fire District 10 who would have some ability to control somehow, especially if the Gresham Fire Department turns into the Fire District 10. There's a lot of ifs in that whole scenario. All you can control is what citizens Troutdale do in terms of marketing and information.
Okay. All right, so number 6 is set the next meeting to finalize recommendations.
Yeah, if I'm going to a calendar, I mean, you're looking the week of the 13th to the 20th. The week of the 20th is Thanksgiving, which is a little early this year on the 23rd. If you're gonna go a month out, that's Monday, the 20th, the week of Thanksgiving.
I won't be available. I have parent conferences Monday and Tuesday that week.
Sure.
But you can still run it without me. I'm just saying I won't be here.
I mean, the week
13th?
before,
13th.
there's a council meeting on the 14th. I don't know what planning commission, Tanny, do you know?
No, we could do the 13th, the Monday.
13th to Monday, yeah. So,
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
that works.
We'll do 13th. I'll get by the end of this week, I'll get you guys out some information, some more sheets to start looking at. Okay. And you guys are more than welcome to come back again also, and I'll probably go ahead and send our new
We
list.
just crash.
Okay. Dang those public meeting rules. I'll send to Greg and Philip both those lists that I'm creating for them to work with you. And then he can distribute them to who he likes over in Fairview. Okay.
Okay, so number 7 is committee comments. Randy?
Nothing. Thank you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it very much.
Tanny?
Thank you also for being here, and Ray, thanks for putting this together. And great discussion tonight. Thank you, guys.
Rich?
Just to clarify, the numbers you were talking about, the savings and all that, that wasn't something the council or budget committee was talking about beforehand, and we need to make this move. That was something that came up afterwards. So just so you're aware, it was more driven by, I think, a 2001 Monoma County Citizens Advisory Committee that thought from the sheriff's perspective would be good to combine with the cities. So it wasn't homegrown.
Carla?
Discussion, thank you guys.
Thank you. Where's my dinner?
Yeah, it's, I think it bespeaks our interest and commitment to wanting to work collaboratively.
Thank you.
we appreciate you allowing us to have a small voice. We were content being over here listening, but the fact that you want to hear a little bit from us speaks volumes, and it's not unnoticed.
Jordan?
I would just say thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. I wish I was there in person, and more options, the better. More questions. It's just going to get our thought processes going. So it was a great conversation tonight, and I enjoyed listening to all of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Well, he's not on the committee unless you wanted him to say something.
Yeah.
He's
Every
here.
committee I'm on, we always ask Paul.
He's public.
Public
So,
comment,
yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, yes, motion to adjourn.
Second,
Do we have a first?
he made it.
Okay.
You're used to hearing
Yeah.
Dave's voice, not mine.
Right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Should we have a vote?
I'm in staff support tonight.
You don't have to, you don't have to call out.
Did I state that correctly?
Oh, that's.
Yeah, buddy.
There's no way we need to do this alone.